start.
Okay, so I'm just going to start the recording as well. And once that's been turned on, we'll be ready to start.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
That's now been turned on, so we're actually ready to proceed.
Good evening, everyone. It's 6:30, so I'm prepared to start the corporate committee meeting. I can see you all. You're all ready to go. So, welcome. Agenda. We have apologies for absence.
Yes, we have apologies for absence from Councillor Mahayam, and we have apologies for lateness from Councillor Potter.
Thank you. Any others?
Chair,
Just
to say, I know Councillor Joseph has messaged me in the last half an hour to say she wasn't sent the email calling notice, but I forwarded her the joining instructions, so she may be late because she's dealing with that.
Okay, thank you. Can we make sure that she's on?
Claire Joseph just text me, and then if we can email her the link so she can join.
I've just sent it to her.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's great.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Chair, I need to leave off to join another meeting later on.
Okay. Thank you for letting us know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alrighty.
Jessica, I assume we've got a legal officer here. I don't know if you could introduce us.
Okay, that's probably a good idea, but I have limited viewing. So, Rabia, have we got our legal officer with us tonight?
I can't see her on the video call, so no, but she was given an invitation.
We would normally ask that we do have a legal officer. It's a good call. Vincent, well.
Yeah, Josephine. I'll email her.
Okay, thank you. Is that all right? We'll just carry on then.
Yeah, I mean, we're not making decisions, but one would normally expect.
Because we like to kind of check things as we go along.
Well, we might do all sorts of
Who knows?
Wrong. Should be somebody.
Yes.
Vincent could do a tap dance.
That's not quite what we're about.
So who's this?
Okay. I don't know.
You're referring to me?
Hi.
Yes.
Are you a lawyer?
Am I a lawyer?
Yeah.
No, I'm not a lawyer. No, I'm the policy and infrastructure manager.
Oh, okay.
I'm a mere mortal.
Alrighty. Okay, well, that's fine. Well, welcome. I think introductions are quite tricky in a size like this, so we will carry on. It is all recorded, so we know who's in the room. Can I to agenda item 2, declarations of interest? Anyone need to declare anything for the items on the agenda tonight? Thank you. Item 3, consideration of the minutes of the previous meeting. Now, I do need to apologise, Rabia. I do get to have a look at this before we send them out. There is a typo. My fault. Should have picked it up. 6.1 in the last full line. That's the word government at the end of that first.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. I should have picked that up last time, but it's government. Members happy with the minutes from the last meeting? Please say. Yeah. Lovely. Getting a good thumbs up there. That's great. Thank you very much. Whilst we don't have matters arising on the agenda, there is the final point that Andy Cunningham talking about the skips issue. Now, I know that we haven't got him tonight. I've had a chat with Councillor Stopps and Councillor Hanson. This meeting really isn't one for casework per se, but it is an issue and we are strategic and it is a point of enforcement. And I was proposing that outside of this meeting, we could set up a meeting with Andy Cunningham anyone else that's interested. And we'll just have like a half an hour slot to talk about how we permit and we enforce skip licenses, particularly when it's on, like a bus lane, TFL, busy street. Is that okay with everyone? And I might need a bit of coordination outside of the meeting, Rabia, if that's okay with you. Okay, but that was specifically on that point. We don't need to chat about it now, but I think we'll, it's something that we want to take up, and I'll take it up outside of the meeting. Okay, thank you very much. Are they agreed then? Yes, they are agreed. Thank you.
I think we've got a legal officer here as well. Is that Josephine? Yes.
Yes. Good evening, Josephine. Thank you.
Sorry, it is me with pigtails today. Hello. How are you
That's
guys?
okay. That's fine.
Apologies. I'm in a couple of minutes late. I was on a work call.
Absolutely fine. So that's great. As long as you're invited and you know that you're here, that's all that counts. That's great. And maybe just in time, just to oversee everything. Number 4, appointment to planning subcommittee. Now we have the recommendation for Councillor Chauhan to go to the planning subcommittee. Now,
Yeah, to be appointed to the planning.
yes,
subcommittee.
to appoint them. So can we agree that appointment?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Now, yes, you might have noticed in your papers, item number 5, which is the Planning Authority Monitoring Report 2019 to 20. I'm going to invite Natalie. Yeah, we do have, I've got the name, Natalie Brufton, to introduce the report.
It'd be probably Chair.
I'm afraid, Chair, you have me instead.
Okay, no, I mean, I thought, like, I'm reading Natalie Brufton, but I don't see Natalie Brufton. Right, fine. Yeah, are you doing it then, Carol? Yeah.
Yes, please, Chair, if I may. Thank you.
Well, it looks a challenge. It looks a challenge. So off you go. Wishing you the best.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. My name, for those of you who haven't met me, is Karol Jakubczyk. I am the Strategic Planning Manager, covering at the moment for Katie Glasgow, who is on maternity leave. And you have the pleasure of not just myself, but also my team members, Georgina Barretta and Kyun Sang, who I may call upon should there be any questions that are beyond my ability, which is entirely possible. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome members to the latest version of the Authority Monitoring Report, or as I will from now on refer to it, the AMR, which does cover a period that is now in history, that is the financial year 2019 through to 2020. The AMR, for members who haven't encountered it previously, is a key part of the local planning authority's plan making and decision taking processes. It is a requirement of us as the local planning authority to produce an AMR as part of the planning regulations. It provides an insight into our performance as plan makers and place shapers, and it can serve to trigger interventions, whether that's reviews of policy or indeed more direct interventions through decision taking. This particular AMR builds upon the suite of existing AMRs that we have already prepared. It feeds directly through into our plan making processes, so it has helped inform the production of LP33. It is helping inform the production and preparation of our emerging area-based plans and our generic thematic plans. I think it's worth just briefly covering the data sets that the AMR uses, because there is a degree of topicality and impact this particular reporting period. So the AMR is prepared using data including internal data from our M3 system and external data from the London Development Database, the LDD, which is referred to in the report. These data sets hold information on emerging development that is basically going through the planning sausage machine, so planning applications, approvals, commencements and completions. Important indicators of delivery and performance against the sort of the targets that we have been set and are being set either by government or through the London Plan process, or indeed by ourselves. Typically, we prepare the AMR in the sort of the final quarter of the calendar year, through sort of September, October. This year, for this reporting period, as I'm sure all members will be aware, we have been beset by a couple of challenges, shall I put them. I think the most significant, obviously, being the cyber attack that the council was subjected to. But also, as we mentioned in the reports, the GLA has shifted the LDD database to the new London Data Hub, and as a consequence of this and the cyber attack, the data sets that my team have had to work with have not been entirely complete nor as detailed as we would have liked them to be. So as you will see in the report and in the enclosure, the AMR itself, there are a few health warnings and caveats that for this reporting period, the data is not complete. Now, that's not to say the data's been lost. As members will be aware, the council is working hard to recover data that is currently inaccessible because of the cyber attack. My team are working with the GLA to try and get better access to the data that is currently less accessible through the London Data Hub. The good news is that this has accelerated our move towards cloud-based systems that are more secure and more accessible, such as our Tascomi system, which members of the planning subcommittee will be familiar with. We use in our day-to-day planning decision-taking functions. So that brings me to the key headlines. I know in previous years officers have presented in detail. I proposed tonight to just go through the key headlines and hopefully underscore some of the good news messages that this AMR reports upon. As with most local plan monitoring reports, I propose we start with the housing delivery. That is, particularly in terms of the assessments that we have from central government, such as the housing delivery test, the most significant area for the AMR. As I've written here, it's the most closely scrutinised part of our performance monitoring. So, the good news is, and the headline message from the AMR is, that we have successfully delivered on 98% of our housing requirement for the period 2015 to 2019. Certainly in housing delivery test terms, that is a solid basis to move and build upon. Breaking that down, during this reporting period, we delivered just over 1,000 new homes, of which 969 were conventional self-contained homes, the area of greatest need and greatest demand, with that small remainder, residual amount. It's about 80 or so units delivered in the form of non-conventional housing, whether that's student accommodation, HMOs, I've written here whilst we, so that's the good news and a positive base to build upon. Whilst we haven't been able to sort of match that with the same level of affordable housing delivery, and we have a high level of ambition in that area, what I can report upon, having consulted closely with my colleagues in the growth team, is that we do have a very positive prospect for the next reporting period. We will, I think we can project forward that there is a proportionate response. Sorry, I'll start that again. The next reporting period is going to be much better and demonstrates a more proportionate response from us in terms of market signals around demand for affordable housing. We anticipate that in the next reporting year there will be an improvement on that affordable delivery. And this is the information from colleagues in the growth team. So far, in this forthcoming reporting period, we have already approved schemes that will deliver in the region of 900 new homes, of which around 420 plus will be affordable homes. That's about 48%. The indications are good that the vast majority of these approvals will actually be implemented. The majority of these approvals come from large schemes, some of which have already started to come out of the ground. So I think that genuinely is a sort of a piece of good news that we can attach as a footnote to the AMR. Whilst affordable delivery this year hasn't been a match to our ambition, the prospect moving forward is much better. Moving on to other areas of headline messaging, employment and retail, again, for the reporting period, and I appreciate the members will understand that things were very different in 2019 and 2020, but for that reporting period, the indicators were very positive around, particularly the provision and delivery of new employment floor space. So we did have a strong performance in terms of scale of permissions and the number of new businesses starting up during that reporting period. Equally, in terms of retail and town centre uses, evidence demonstrates good performance that supported the vitality and viability of our town centres across the borough. Obviously, since then, we have had the COVID pandemic restrictions, which inevitably will have an impact on commercial uses, the ability for businesses to sort of operate and set up, and obviously the ability for retail uses to function as they would like to normally. These are all areas I can guarantee members, officers are looking at very closely, because obviously the evidence that comes out of this data will help inform our policy making going forward. An area of very good performance is around Section 106 and SIL collection. When I read this as somebody coming to Hackney from outside of Greater London, I was quite astounded by the scale of receipts received by the council in terms of Section 106 and SIL. It really is genuinely impressive. During the reporting period, as members will note, we received a very healthy receipt of £13 million in Section 106 payments, of which we successfully invested £6.7 million in extensive improvements to libraries, schools, health infrastructure, job creation, public realm improvements, and open spaces. In terms of our own Hackney community infrastructure levy, we also performed very well, in excess of 4 million invoiced, and in excess of £4.5 million actually received during the reporting period. On top of that, we collected nearly £3 million of mayoral SIL, which, as members know, goes towards the Crossrail improvement. In terms of transport, evidence demonstrates that our performance remains strong, and I think importantly, there is compelling evidence within the AMR that our interventions are positively influencing residents' travel patterns and travel mode choices, and there's strong evidence that shows that residents are making the choice to walk as a form of transport, as opposed to reliance on private vehicular forms. Higher than the average for the capital, I've noted here, complemented by an increasing number of car-free developments that are not only being permitted and approved through our decision-taking, but are also being delivered by the development industry, which is incredibly promising. In terms of heritage and design, the two headline messages were that there's been a slight drop in performance, with an increase of buildings at risk on our buildings at risk register, going up to 33. So that's a net increase of 4 from the previous year. However, this has been balanced by an increasing number of new builds schemes being nominated for the Hackney Design Awards, which hopefully is an indicator that not only is new growth and new development being more widely accepted by residents and communities, but it is it's being recognised of being of a quality that residents and communities want for the borough. Planning performance, so this is across the wider service, from both the development management team, the growth team, and our colleagues in building control, remains strong. 95% of all major applications were determined within the 13-week target date. 82% of all minor applications were determined within the 8-week target date, again easily exceeding the targets that we had set ourselves. Validation rates also were noted as improving, although I think that's a progressive process. And I've noted elsewhere in the service, building control also has strong performance, with 85% of applications being processed within 3 days, and the level of site inspections undertaken within 1 day of request being an impressive 91%. Finally, Chair, just to highlight the section under the headlines of what the future holds, and this is really, again, looking forward beyond the reporting year, very much so focused in terms of housing delivery and where the borough is likely to sit in performance, particularly when assessed against the government's housing delivery test, but increasingly how we begin to work towards a newly introduced new standard method for calculating objectively assessed housing need, which identifies a much higher level of housing demand for the borough than that which we have typically seen coming from the London plan, and it is very much with that in the sort of medium to long term that the borough, as the local planning authority, will have to shift its sights towards. the positive that the report highlights is that because LP33 and the growth strategy, site allocations, and general approach, policy approach to growth that is set out in our local plan is geared towards the higher objectively assessed housing need figure that we identify through our own SHMA, rather than being reliant on the London plan target. The positive message is that the government resetting the goalposts, whilst it remains a challenge, it isn't unassailable. We are already working to a higher target than that aspires to through the London plan, and we can build upon that moving forward. So, having presented, Chair, I would pass back to you, and if members have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them, but I'm also happy to try and deflect them to my two colleagues, Georgina and Kyung, if they're beyond me. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, members, right. Thank you. I would expect a question from Councillor Stopps. So good. Would you like to start? Oh, unmute yourself, Councillor Stopps.
Yes, I'll kick off. Just two questions. Ever since I've been a councillor, I think we've had 32 heritage, 32 buildings at risk on the heritage register, and it just pops up and down. You know, it's all 32 is the number I can remember 15 years ago, and it is so sad that we can't. We're doing so much, but we can't seem to make any ground on it. And I wonder. There's been 4 new additions, but I don't see that in the where I'm reading it. I wonder what they are. If you could let us know either now or after the meeting. And the second thing is the car-free development is a substantive part of our efforts to try and persuade people to not use cars. It's very effective, more effective than any other mechanism I know. I wonder, previously we've had a little graph of how we compare in terms of car-free developments compared to other London boroughs. And the reason I'm asking is because we come out well in that statistic. And I wonder again if we could see that either now or outside of the meeting.
Thank you. I'm going to say that we aren't going to get that graph right now, but probably ask for it to be circulated and shared afterwards, if that's...
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, Carol, thank you. I can't see any other hands up, but I've got a limited full screen. So if other members would use the raise hand, but I haven't got any
I
others.
can see Claire Joseph and Peter Snell, Jessica.
Yeah. Can I have Councillor Snell? Ask your question, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I've now lowered my hand, but I did have the electronic hand up, as did Claire.
Oh, interesting. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to ask 2 questions, as did Vincent. And I may preempt Claire because I know it's a matter of concern to her. The first is regarding affordable rent, covered on page 26 of the report. I just wondered if we could have some clarification, because I should understand it, but I do get confused. So affordable rent, social rent, intermediate. Which is which? We know we get any amount of stick at public meetings where people talk about affordable rents that no one can afford. And the other thing I don't quite understand is I know the Mayor of London was talking about a genuine affordable rent as a new type of private rented sector development. And I wondered, have we had any of those? And I think we in Hackney were talking about working with the Mayor to do some fairly pioneering work on making them even cheaper. So have we had any of those built? And if so, what of those headings would it come under? So that's my first question. My second question is, a reference to page 40 on the nighttime economy. As I'm also a member of both planning and licensing, I well understand that we have a special policy area and we are concerned about cumulative impact. And that obviously in some of the centres which are designated for entertainment, which are Shoreditch and Dalston. Now, on that page 40, there's a reference to somehow tying together the two policies. And I've pushed this in the past. You know, as a council, we need to have one overall policy. And I think, but I wouldn't want to be too restrictive. It's quite obvious that bars are going to be popular in town centre locations, and to some extent have saved places like Dalston as the retail has left. So I wondered if someone could expand on exactly how we're going to sort of balance that apparent conflict. I think we've got some very good policies in place at the moment. I just wondered exactly how the reference on page 40 is going to be worked through.
Do you want to tackle that, Carol? Ben? That's good.
Shall I take the rent question, Carol?
Yes, please, and I'll struggle through answering Councillor Snell's second question.
Okay, so
You just muted yourself. Georgina.
sorry. Yes, you're quite right. The various definitions of affordable rent can be quite baffling. I will send you a link with all the definitions in a table. It's on the GLA's website, but I'll send you the link because it's quite a succinct table. But very sort of top level, social rent is a rent that's based on a nationally set formula. And it's the cheapest of all the rents in London, and they're the rent levels that the council will charge most of its tenants. And then after that, you have affordable London living rent. Sorry? No?
No, nothing. Carry on, please.
Sorry, yeah. And then you have London living rent, which is based on the average household income of a ward. And then Hackney living rent is that rent available in perpetuity to our tenants in our flats. And then social shared ownership is the 80% of market value. So that's very roughly what it is, but there is a table which I will send you a link to, and you can scan that across and read the details on that. Is that okay?
Yep, thank you, Georgina. Please,
sorry,
that's the rent part, yeah?
Chair,
Yep.
I was asking specifically about the table on page 26, because what that hasn't addressed is we've had no mention of housing association housing, where that fits in. There was a reference to London living and Hackney living rent. And again, are you saying that is affordable rent? Are we saying that that old headline figure of 80% of market rents is no longer a part of the picture? And are you telling us that shared ownership is what comes under intermediate? Is that what you're telling us?
Yes, you said a lot there in one go, but broadly, yes.
I mean, are they, is that a breakdown that you'd want to see? Are you saying that we should see a better breakdown in that table next time, Councillor Snell?
I think it's absolutely essential for people to understand our housing policies and what we are able to achieve, because they get rubbished so often using these headings without actually stating exactly what they mean in terms of practical rent levels and if people can afford them. Just isn't helpful. It doesn't, it might, if even I struggle to understand where they all fit in. I know it's not primarily planning, because the issue about London living rent and Hackney living rent are two different categories, but I think it's legitimate to include it in a planning report so people, you know.
Yep, we'll do that in future, but I'll send you that table as well.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I do see, and apologies, Councillor Joseph, you raised your hand. Are you on mute? Because I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute. Sorry,
Okay.
can you hear me
Yes,
now, Chair?
We can do. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
We can. We'll have
Sorry,
you-
I think there's a bit. Hello. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Have you got?
Thank you for that report. I've got a couple of questions. Councillor Snell was correct. My first. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Just crack on.
I'm gonna carry on. I think you can hear me. Great. So the first one, just going on to housing, it's 5.1. So we say that we've got the aim of ensuring that housing needs of Hackney's residents are met in a sustainable way. Then 5.14 says that new housing growth is broadly in line with the aims of the core strategy. But perhaps like Councillor Snell, I mean, I was very disappointed looking at these figures. So 2019, we only managed one social rent. This is one additional social rent property. Only 227 over 5 years. That's compared to 5,264 market rent in the same time period. So I suppose, first of all, what I just want to establish is that including council-led schemes, such as our own programmes, that has only managed to achieve one additional social rent home. And I suppose, I mean, we all know the benefits of council housing. There's economic benefits for everyone. It helps push down the private rent, helps reduce housing benefit bills, and so on and so on. So I think it's really important that we get that figure up. And I'm wondering, do we need a stricter policy on the amount of affordable housing that we're actually willing to accept in any development? I do have two more questions, but perhaps, I don't know, I don't want to be, should I ask them all now, or should I?
One at a time.
I'm thinking one at a time.
Chair, would you mind if Georgina and I tried to... Sorry.
What was that, Vincent?
Would you mind if... Would you mind if Georgina and I tried to sort of respond to Councillor Joseph's question?
Yes, do that then. Let's have it one at a time.
My colleagues and I did try to get to the bottom of why there was sort of a poor performance around affordable housing delivery during the reporting period. And the response that we got from colleagues in the growth team was that there is no one single reason for this. There have been delays, or there had been delays during the reporting period to some of the larger schemes that are coming forward across the borough. And it is very much the larger development schemes that are delivering the bulk of affordable housing, rather than the small scale stuff. And any delay that takes place on those larger sites will have an impact on our statistics. It is unfortunately as simple as that. Other reasons that were given, there were a number of development proposals where essentially because of the at that time projected increases in mayoral CIL, the developers either held back or accelerated delivery so that they would avoid having to pay more money for the mayoral CIL, and as a consequence that sort of a creative process resulted in an impact on our statistics. Equally, there is the sort of perennial issue of Brexit uncertainty, and conceivably there is going to be delay around some schemes coming forward around the COVID pandemic restrictions that will impact on the forthcoming reporting period. However, as I sort of set out in my presentation, that there is some hope coming forward in terms of the permissions that have been granted in the current reporting period and their high likelihood of implementation. As I said, many of those are on larger schemes. It is the larger schemes that deliver affordable housing in Hackney. I think in response to another part of your question, Councillor Joseph, what interventions can we secure to ensure that we do deliver on our affordable housing ambition? Certainly one piece of takeaway advice I would give to members is ensure that schemes coming forward for decision in front of the planning authority optimise their capacity and deliver as much in terms of optimal numbers as they possibly can, because the larger the scheme, the more certain that scheme will deliver affordable housing provision. Obviously, the larger the scheme, proportionately, the greater the number of affordable housing that it can contribute works as well. I mean, that is our policy approach. I don't know if you have anything further to add, Georgina.
No, I think you've comprehensively covered that. Just one maybe small piece to add is that, so that covers the private development, certainly in terms of our own house building. We have, so this year we didn't complete any build at all, so that won't be reflected in the years gone stats. But we did quite well last year, the year before that rather, and we're going to do quite well this financial year we're in at the minute, because they do quite a few estate region is to complete this year. So the forthcoming stats will look better on that. But also, even though we try and squeeze the private sector for as much, we're also trying to squeeze our own land. And how our council house building programme is structured, we are looking to add in additional units in our own rebuilds when we redevelop our estates. But we also have to consider the issue of densifying our estates. And an awful lot of our residents don't like dense sites, but they do like a nice building, and design costs. And the only way to pay for cost is to increase the private numbers, which means that space could have gone to social housing. So there's a balance there to be achieved between how much density and how much design you want compared to how many social rent units the overall scheme can afford to wash its face with. So it's both sides, council and private development, that's struggling to bring forward the social rent.
Okay. Well, Kurt, you've got another 2 questions. So do you want to go for question 2? Okay, unmute yourself. Off you go. No, I think we've lost.
Thank you. Yes, thank you both. Thanks for the answer. I mean, I suppose just as a response, I would say, as far as I understand it, we are able now to borrow. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I completely understand what you're saying. I mean, and obviously densification is an issue. People want to live with some recreational space. They don't want to be packed in like sardines. But having said that, we can borrow now, can't we? So are we borrowing enough, I suppose, is a question. I don't know if we can answer that in this meeting. But my other questions, I'll try to be quick. Also, just echoing Councillor Snell about the nighttime economy. Yeah, I was a little bit concerned really, because it sort of said under 7.10 that you know, there was going to be potentially some expansion of uses, and some areas like Shoreditch and Broadway Market were mentioned. And well, it's just that we've recently actually had to bring in enforcement in London Fields, which borders Broadway Market, because the market has made it such a drinking spot. So I'm a little bit unsure about any more expansion of these areas, as I think they can already be quite difficult for residents already. So I'm just wondering, I mean, does this need any kind of review, do you think? Because the drinking associated with these areas that are particularly heavy on bars, it can be a bit exclusive as well, and some people that live around there can, I think, feel quite uncomfortable and left out. So I'm just wondering if we've got any plans to consult residents before encouraging any further expansion, I suppose. And
Okay, is that question 2? I mean, that seems like a bit of a statement, I suppose, to a question on can we consult on it, and I'm not sure.
But Chair, I would point out that Carol never replied to my question on the same subject, so perhaps he can reply to the questions, both questions together.
Yes, Chair, I'm very happy to take
Thanks,
that.
Bill.
And my apologies, Councillor Snell. I fear that the moment wasn't opportune, so my mistake. My apologies. My experience of town centre management and certainly managing nighttime, the tensions that can arise from evening and nighttime economies isn't extensive, but I do genuinely have some experience of this from my previous roles in Surrey, and I certainly the advice that I would give members here is that this isn't an exclusively sort of a planning policy instrument led solution to this issue, and certainly planning policy is a good starting basis for the council's approach to the challenges around nighttime economies. It is the place to make statements about the council's strategy towards nighttime economies, and it is absolutely the place to make statements about how the nighttime economy benefits the wider place and how it benefits the economy of that particular place, that particular town centre or particular part of the borough. But planning policy doesn't work in isolation in this case, and there is a really important role for other elements of the council's sort of regulatory responsibilities, and particularly in terms of licensing, not just in terms of licensing the sale and consumption of alcohol, but also in terms of licensing. Again, this reflects my experience. The provision of the sort of the taxi cabs that take people out of these areas once everything closes down, and you need to deal with the antisocial behaviour that may arise or that may be perceived to arise from nighttime economies. So certainly my advice to the council going forward is that the plan making functions of the council and the planning decision taking functions of the council do need to work more closely with other regulatory arms such as the licensing team to ensure that decisions on the ground are consistent with our policy approach, because certainly that inconsistency that might arise between what we say in our planning policy and what we do in terms of licensing, that in my experience is where actual on the ground issues and tensions can arise. I hope that's partly helpful. I notice Councillor Snell might have a follow-up question.
He always does. But it was, I mean, Councillor Joseph, are you okay? Have you answered, have you asked all the questions, yeah? I see,
Shall I come back quickly?
if you want to come back
well, just
quickly,
to say-
and I see you, Councillor Stopps, afterwards.
Okay, I mean, you're absolutely correct, Carol. And I think in terms of the change of planning uses that's happening in Shoreditch and Dalston, what you're seeing is increased restaurant and cafe use, which is exactly what we were trying to do, because we felt that that caused less, through our licensing conditions, because we felt that that created less annoyance to neighbours. So I think the two policies are already supporting each other. I was just slightly confused when clearly they are two different quasi-judicial processes, how exactly we link them up together, because undoubtedly if we have a growing population, we will have growing consumption of alcohol and food in town centres. So we have to allow for that. It's how we allow for it fairly. But that's okay. It was a general question. I'm not in any way trying to interfere or impose licensing thoughts upon what we do as a planning committee. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stopps? You're on mute. You're on mute, Councillor. You have to take yourself off. Thank you.
Just essentially how I try and think about these sort of things. The planning process is strongest in directing these sort of activities to our town centres, because otherwise they will pop up in other places. And so, as Peter says, there's a lot of people who want to have a drink, or at least they used to want to have a drink, and I suspect they'll want to have more drinks when they come out of lockdown. And what do we do in terms of that real world aspiration or desire? What we try and do with our planning policies is say, hey, Dalston's a good place to have drinking establishments, Hackney Central is, and to a degree Broadway Market is. Otherwise, the businesses will be able to argue that we're being too prescriptive, and the planning process will allow them to go elsewhere if you don't direct them as we try to do. So you can only do so much, I think, is what I'm trying to say, in my view.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got one other question if no one else has. In the table on page 28 for the delivery by Warden Place, there are no figures for Hackney Wick. Sorry, it's a bit my backyard, but I just wondered why there aren't any, even though I do fully appreciate LLDC is still on our patch, but we still got half a patch, or do we monitor what they're doing in terms of social, affordable?
Can I defer to either Georgina or Kyung?
Yeah. Hi. Yes. So we don't, because LLDC are the monitoring body, and they're doing the equivalent that we're doing now for Hackney Wick. So we haven't been including Hackney Wick in the last 3, at least, AMRs that have come out. However, now that we've started the sort of prep for the transition of powers in 2024, we're going to have to start picking it up. So definitely in the next AMR, we're going to start engaging with them. All of the boroughs in that LLDC will have to start engaging more closely to facilitate a smoother transition, and that will include picking up our respective bits of their AMRs. So you will see that in the next AMR.
I mean, it would be really interesting. It's a point of absolute principle that we fight with LLDC and what housing schemes they're building in our patch, right? And what terms they're doing it, and how much, is the, let's argue, affordable social. The really key thing, I know that my fellow councillor, Councillor Sharman, is on it and on them, but until they hand over these powers, which is way over their time, they are making these key decisions in the most major development that we've certainly seen, since industrialisation probably. And also it's only up until to the A12, but the key stuff is in the LLDC ground. So it would be really interesting if you could pick it out and start nudging them and saying, we want to know this because we want to report this, and then we can see what you are agreeing. It needs to be more transparent and reported back to us. And I would, even though it's not ours strictly, I think it's a really key thing to say, we are monitoring this. and we are making sure that it is transparent, because this is what we're talking about. Okay, thank you. Right. So I cannot see anybody else. And I'm just bringing up what we need to do. We need to approve the performance reported for the AMR for financial year 2019-20. What a year. Do we approve the performance report?
Approved.
Approved.
Agree.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Carol.
Thank
you,
you.
Chair.
Good night. Thank you. Cheers. Thanks.
Okay. We're going to move on. Agenda item 6, even bigger. Introduction of the rules of governance document and update on all the policy changes and consultations undertaken in 2019 and 2020 regarding all licensable activity within markets, shop fronts and street trading. What we love in this committee.
We do.
So I invite, do we have, I'm trying to look down the list. It says Daniel O'Sullivan. Do we have?
Yep, evening. How is
Evening.
everybody?
Okay.
We've also got Matthew Still, the Market Service Operations Manager. So to cheer you up, we're going to tag team our way through the presentation of the report and take you through the rules of governance document. So you're with me for the first part, and then halfway through I'll hand over to Matt.
Great. All right,
So,
let's start.
as many of you will recall, at the last committee meeting, we shared the annual report, and then we shared the update as requested on the consultations into the changes to terms, conditions, fees and charges, and a number of other governance pieces. In the last 12 to 18 months, we've completely updated approximately 90% of the governance, with the only pieces left outstanding being the market service strategy, which was completed prior to the end date of 2020, and the market service policy, which expired at the end of 2020, and they were delayed because of the pandemic. And we will be beginning to plan those out in readiness for public consultation in Q2 of this year. But in respects of the overall governance that went live, we took the feedback from the committee and have created a governance document that essentially brings together all of the significant different pieces of legislation and governance that we need to navigate, as well as all the different terms of reference for the different styles of regulatory meetings, committee meetings, stakeholder engagement meetings, and other relevant council-led policies that our stakeholders and our traders and license holders are all held to just as much as we are. Now, one of the things that came out throughout the process was that there is such a vast amount of legislation and policies and documentation, and many of the stakeholders, members, at times would struggle to find the relevant policies or the relevant documentation. And what we've essentially done is taken all of those pieces, and in one succinct document, which I will share my screen and just show you before I hand over to Matt to talk you through some of the pertinent changes. Can you all see the document on the screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. So we've created a digitized document that can be printed for those people who are not necessarily tech savvy, although at 331 pages, please remember that will be the equivalent to half a tree. So we have ensured that this document is fully accessible on the web pages. It works in its full glory on tablet, smartphone, laptop, PC. All of the contents page in itself is hyperlinked. So any section that you wish to go to, you can just click and the document will take you straight to it for ease of reference. As you'll be able to see, we have created a bit of an introduction as to, obviously this is a new document, and this document will be made available to all of our license holders from the 1st of April, and we are meeting with them later this week with Councillor Nicholson to take them through the document. We have created a section of an introduction around the markets and street trading structure and team, similar to what was already in the handbook, which we took the members of this committee through 2 meetings ago. A copy of the actual markets policy across the borough, every type of term and condition for all the different license in which we license in the borough, and also includes the ABLED guidance, which on many occasions has been highlighted is difficult to find by service users and interested business parties. So we've ensured that not only does it have a prominent place within the rules of governance, it is now listed on all the relevant pages on our licensing pages, as well as finding a home within the shopfront trading handbook. It also includes the fees and charges, the commodity policy that's currently in place, copies of both handbooks, a copy of the market strategy, the enforcement policy that's adopted within the London Borough of Hackney, the officer licensing panel process, the advisory board terms of reference for operational and strategic meetings with stakeholders, obviously the corporate committee, and the terms of reference for the meetings that we have here. Code of conduct for our trades association and stakeholders, which is the only new thing that you wouldn't have previously been aware of. And once Matt has taken you through, I'll take you through this section in a little bit more detail. The social media code of conduct, in which we have highlighted from our comms team, and then the guidance on managing unreasonable and unreasonably persistent customer behaviour, which again is another customer-facing policy. So Matt, I'm going to hand over to Matt, and he's going to take you through some of the policy context changes that we've put in place over the last 12 to 18 months and some rationale as to why. And then when he's completed that section, I'm going to bring back up the rules of governance, and I'll take you through the code of conduct and the guidance document that was much requested, and particularly by Councillor Snell at the last meeting in regards to supporting stakeholders in creating associations. We've done a lot of work on that guidance document. So Matt, if I hand over to you.
Thank you, Dan. Chair, councillors, good evening. Just touching on from where Dan left off there, just running through on the government's document sections 422, 423, I'll touch on terms and conditions. There were a number of significant updates to the terms and conditions, particularly pertaining to the creation of the borough's first ever bespoke terms and conditions for shop fronts and pavement trading. Also improving the appearance of stalls, gazebos and trading units across all markets, shop fronts and street trading. Conditions were also updated to reflect current consumer legislation and to provide more specific conditions to ensure full compliance with aspects to waste management from the existing licence holders. Additionally, conditions to recognise changes in the industry, such as many traders now trading directly from specially made vehicles or receptacles such as pods, many of which are street food traders. There were improvements to the management and food standards across street food traders, providing more specific conditions to ensure full compliance with aspects of health and safety legislation. The modernisation, the position of that presently allows a permanent licence to be passed to a relative or assistant after a defined period of time in years, and also to improve the vetting of potential traders and shopfront licence applicants, particularly street food traders and vendors, which are expanding, definitely an expanding area of markets and shopfront services. The reintroduction support and process for maternity leave and long-term sick in line with legislation. Also to revise the conditions regarding management and enforcement, whilst clarifying the severity of contraventions and the enforcement process in line with the Council's enforcement policy. Now again, Dan has quite clearly highlighted that within the government's doc that's there, everything is totally transparent in relation to any aspect that a trader or any other individual would need to help them in any guidance or advice they need in any section of the implementation in Market Street Guidance Policy. Now, if we move slightly onwards now to the fees and charges, I think it's well known that within Hackney, we offer what would probably be the lowest charge rate per daily fee on a 6-day market within London in general. For a market like Ridley Road that has 2.8 million visitors per year, with a cheapest daily fee of £12.50, is quite a comprehensive, affordable fee within London itself. If you take into comparison the likes of Lewisham or even Lambeth, Lewisham, the daily charge is £27 per day. If you look at Lambeth, where Brixton is concerned, it's £35 per day. So in comparison, the service that's being provided to the traders in Hackney, as far as I'm concerned, and within hopefully the general opinion of the council, that we are offering a service second to none and giving traders every opportunity to take advantage of some of the cheapest rates that's available to them in London. Not only that, in relation to fees and charges, we also helped when it came to shop fronts and put in place a new branding charge. Now, that also helped to charge per square metre, which gave a cheaper and more productive, cost-effective way to people having the shopfront licences. Before, they were probably paying through the nose because it was a general format and cast across the board. But by changing it and charging per square metre, people were able to take advantage of that at a much lower reduced rate, which certainly helped them in their business. This again, obviously, we're certainly in a situation where all we're trying to do at the end of the day is support as many new traders and existing traders as we can to help grow their business and enterprises within the London Borough of Hackney. We're doing everything we possibly can to make it as cost effective as we can right across the board to help everyone concerned. As we move on, also touch on alterations to the officer licensing panel, which you will see again documented within the government's doc that Dan highlighted. So within that, we are in a situation where we now have a quorum of 3, and this has given an additional layer for an appeal process. If a decision has been given that the trader doesn't agree with, they have a 28-day period to take it further up the tree before actually going to the magistrates' court. So we've built in another level of protection for them and the opportunity to exercise their options within this new structure. At that point, I'll hand back to Dan, who will cover off on the remaining parts of the document.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So I think it's important to note on, specifically as Matt's touched on with the OLP process, there were a number of issues with it, legislative issues with it that have been corrected. And for us, one of the most important pieces is the addition of an internal appeal process. So whilst the panel may make a decision, historically what would happen under legislation is once the panel made a decision, that decision's it, and the trader has to then go to the magistrates' court, which can be costly for both sides and reputational damage for both sides as well. We want to avoid that. If there are any decisions that are deemed made incorrectly by the panel, we want to be able to capture that internally, where an independent, impartial head of service supported by 2 other officers will then hear any appeal internally before the trader or license holder, dependent on what license they hold, wishes to take up their opportunity to go to court. And we feel this extra layer not only adds an extra level of protection for the local authority, but it also adds another sense of fairness and consistency within the process, in a similar pattern as you see within employment law and internal performance management processes, and will significantly reduce any risk of having to defend a decision within court. And this particular section was very well received within our license holder base. In addition, there's quite a lot of information around pavement licenses. So the government gave us a nice little present in July and introduced a piece of legislation called the Business and Planning Act 2020, and then gave us 4 weeks to create a completely new bespoke licence in regards to pavement licences. Now, whilst pavement licences are relatively normal outside of London, within London, pavement licences predominantly are licensed under the Highways Act or London Local Authorities Act as shopfront licences. And with the fast track processes that the government instructed us to do as directed through the legislation, we had to build a robust process that has multiple consultees, both internally through council services such as licensing, street seeing, community safety, as well as my own team, and externally where it goes out for public consultation, where there's an onus on the business premises advertising the fact that they've applied for a pavement license within their window. This also has to then be checked by an officer, and the public have up to 10 days in which to process any objections that will get heard. We literally have a 10 working day or 14-day window in which to make a decision. There's a very specific criteria, a minimal criteria in which we are able to refuse a license. Currently, of all of the applications in regards to pavement licenses within our borough, approximately 40% of them that have been applied for have been approved, which is a very good rate. Our process has been held up as the exemplar in London. We've been working with the GLA to support other London local authorities with the pavement licence process. For those that didn't necessarily adopt a similarly robust process and set of terms and conditions as we did, and they have significantly found not only the impact to revenue, where they've lost out on obviously shopfront licences and we've only been able to charge a £100 fee, but the increase in ASB, which has had a further impact on costs and services within other local authorities, which we just haven't seen because of the robust process that we have in place, which we're very proud of. We also introduced private operator licenses for private operated markets within the borough. This was not financially led, this was more led around protecting the borough's market rights, of which it has, and also adding a layer of regulatory compliance and control over some of the private operators in which we have had in the borough that have been, their actions and their conduct have caused a number of reputational damage and not necessarily represented value or benefit to our local community. The legislation that primarily is used for the private operator licence is the Food Act, Part 3 of the Food Act 1984. Again, we have a very robust private operator process in place. We have very, very attractive fees. In fact, the actual licence fee is the cheapest in the UK in regards to a private operator fee. So much so that we were asked by the kind of two governing bodies within our industry, NABMA and the NMTF, if we were really sure we wanted to have a fee that low. But it is about introducing and attracting more businesses and providing a wide variety of commodities and services to our community, and enable operators to come in and focus on delivering that high level of service and value. But equally, it's also about ensuring that we have some regulatory control and we can protect our current assets within the borough as well. And if we hadn't have done this, if you think that to the announcement earlier this week from the Secretary of State for Local Government and Communities, where they've extended pavement licences by an additional year to the 30th of September 2022, and also relaxed planning laws around operators being able to exercise public markets. If we hadn't have had this in place, the borough could have been at risk of some operators who don't necessarily have the interests of our community, our borough, our residents at the heart of what they do. We currently have 2 people licensed through this process already that came into effect as of the 1st of April 2020. And again, it's bore fruit in the sense of those of you that are familiar with the many issues that we have had in the Broadway Market London Fields area. And one of the private operators, through this process, we've been able to ensure fell in line with the council-wide policy where we pulled street food across the borough from November, and also came down very heavily in regards to the takeaway alcohol and managing the conduct of both the businesses and the wider public in the area, which has had a significant effect on the overall rate, which has played a significant part in London Field's transmission rate of the virus actually drop. And again, we wouldn't have been able to do this if this piece of legislation and process and policy hadn't been implemented as of the 1st of April 2020. Other guidance in terms of reference information, and again, this is about making sure we are completely transparent, consistent, and open in what we're doing. There is not a single borough, both in London or outside of the UK, outside of London, that has a document like this where it has brought together all of the legislation we operate under, all of the policies and procedures, all of the terms of reference, and actually showcase in a one-stop shop solution how we operate, and allow a level of scrutiny that generally some people within our industry would not be comfortable with. We're the opposite. We're open to scrutiny. We're happy to answer questions and invite people in and take them through. And I think this document has already been picked up by NAVMA, the NMTF, the GLA, the Mayor of London's London Board of Markets, and has been shared quite widely, with London boroughs asked to follow a similar process, because why wouldn't you? You know, we all should be operating transparently, fairly, and consistently. And it isn't just around highlighting how we manage compliance and the regulatory side. It's also about supporting our stakeholders, our community leaders that we work with, the trader representatives and the trader representative bodies. It's about helping educate them, helping them understand how to act and how to play their part in strategic meetings, operational meetings, what to expect in an advisory board, or what to expect in feedback that will come from a corporate committee meeting, how to manage social media and the code of conduct when they're managing their own social media handles and promoting, ensuring that they're working in cohesion and in line with the council. And many of our associations have gone through various different iterations and different members, and one of the things we've seen is that they've lost a lot of experience over the years, and that's led to them working not necessarily in accordance with regulations. And again, we've got more and more people requesting to create their own association and how to do it. And you know, it's a delicate process, because what we can't be seen doing is advising how to create an association in the sense of taking someone through every single step. But what we can do is create a tool and a document, which we've included as part of the governance pack, that gives a real clear indication of what an association is, what a constitution is, what should be in that constitution, the roles that you can have within an association and what those roles do. And that really formed the basis of the Trader Association Stakeholder Code of Conduct. You know, a contract between stakeholders and us, just like we have a code of conduct that we all abide by. It's making sure that that's reflected on both sides, and then that guidance in how to operate and in accordance with those terms and conditions. And at this point, I'll reshare the screen and take you through that section of the governance doc. So give me 2 seconds. So the Code of Conduct for Trade Associations and Stakeholder Community Groups, you'll recognise the document. It's in the same pro forma and format as the Council's Code of Conduct, again for that uniformity and cohesiveness. We adapted the same principles, but towards how the stakeholders and the trader association and groups would operate and do operate, and gave them some guidance around each of those sections in detail. So covering things like avoidance of corruption, dealing with conflicts of interest, accepting gifts and hospitality, dealing with criminal charge convictions. Yeah, all of these over the last 3.5 years have been real issues that our associations and senior trader leads have had and not been sure how to deal with or what to do. And it's been a fine line having to advise them, but equally having to manage that relationship with them, and how to deal with their members. So again, this will give them that confidence and that reference tool that just generally isn't out there, and easily accessible. And this specific document is something that has done its rounds around London, and I've already started to see iterations of it appearing in some of the other boroughs. We'll take you through. It takes you through all the committee roles, breaking down what a chair does, a vice chair, a secretary, treasurer, general committee members if they wish to have them. Then there's some specific notes around who can hold what roles, and making sure there are certain roles that explicitly you cannot hold at the same period of time. Highlighting around accountability and attendance. Also into detail around the constitution, how to manage annual general meetings, and what extraordinary general meetings or emergency general EGMs are, because again, we've had issues where we're having to provide support where senior members of the executive committee have left, and those associations were not aware that they had to hold an EGM in that instance. And it's about just making sure that they're operating in a fair and consistent manner for their members as well, around the kind of expectations and serving the traders. And obviously there is a consequence for breaching some of those regulations, just like there is in any policy, and any regulatory policy and compliance. And again, around the social media code of conduct, because again, we've had some interesting conversations with businesses and traders around their use of social media and the expectations that we have with the posts, particularly when they're being shared through council platforms, and what they need to adhere to. So it's a very, very concise document. I know there are a few comments that I've had from members prior to this meeting. It is a very meaty and lengthy document. It's not necessarily a read from front to back. It is a resource document. It is a one-stop shop solution for people either new into the industry, experienced into the industry, or someone who actually is getting involved from a elected member position like yourselves. And we feel that this will be, or it is effectively the most transparent service in our industry in the UK, and that's something we're very, very proud of. Probably more proud of than the recent awards that we came away with, aren't we, Matt, in regards to this? And we're really looking forward to sharing this on Thursday evening with Councillor Nicholson, helping us present to the traders and the associations. Matt, do you want to say anything else before we hand over to questions?
No, I think you've quite comprehensively covered everything there. But yeah, again, as you say, looking forward to the conversation we'll have with the associations later in the week. And it's certainly a giant step forward, not just for Hackney, but for London in general, because they're following Hackney's example, as they will continue to do for months and years ahead.
Thank you. All right. We had Councillor Williams with her hand up. Councillor Williams?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I'm not sure that I was at the previous meeting where you presented on this, so forgive me if I ask some questions that have been discussed previously. It is a fascinating document, and as you point out, it is guidance for traders. And on the flip side, I'm just kind of wondering what the balance is in terms of residents and councillors. So there's a lot of information in there that governs how traders should interact with one another in terms of their association, and what you would expect from them. But I think what's missing, certainly from the perspective of councillors who have casework where residents live in close proximity to either markets or some of the, for example, coffee carts, and where they're specifically not governed by any kind of consultation. So one day residents wake up and there's a small food market outside their front door, underneath their living room window, or underneath their bedroom window. So if they work nights, they then have to endure noise and chatter and the smell of food cooking. And what recourse is there for residents and for councillors? At the moment, there doesn't seem to be any recourse at all. So both councillors and residents are left in a position where there's absolutely nothing that they can do should a trader or a small food market appear in their wards, because there's absolutely no consultation with councillors, and that kind of leaves us all in an incredibly difficult position. It was just something that I wanted to note. I know that there are a number of councillors in the south of the borough who have had this happen to them, and have had to call on the lead member to intervene, because there is no redress and there is no recourse throughout this process for either councillors or residents. And I wonder if you could address that for everybody here present today.
Yep. So there's two separate pieces. So in regards to a market, so to give you an example, with the additional trading day that we trialled in Broadway during the pandemic to provide the street food traders the opportunity to trade, because we took them out of the Saturday market to ease the congestion in that area for social distancing purposes. Before we did that, we ran a engagement exercise which was sent out to all of the ward members, local residents. There were posters up in the local businesses, officers were out and about with iPads during the week for a defined period of time. And then the engagement survey results were then posted to all the ward members and the relevant stakeholder groups within that London Fields Broadway Market area, with the findings of the engagement survey. And then there was a follow-up meeting to discuss the potential implementation of the additional trading day trial and what that would look like. And we ran a ongoing survey throughout the trial. So the trial was a two-part trial over Fridays for 6 weeks and then on Sundays for 6 weeks. Throughout the 6-week duration of the Friday trial, that survey was open. It was advertised on social media, in the local papers. It was also in the Evening Standard, if correct me if I'm wrong, Matt. And we were sending weekly updates of all the information, all the results to all the ward members, to the local stakeholders involved, the traders, and then an overall report was shared with them in regards to the overall findings of Friday before we moved into the Sunday part. Then we had to put a hold on Sunday because we chose to pull all street food from the borough in November of 2020, and we won't be returning street food to the borough until the 12th of April as part of the return of non-essentials. So markets wise, that's the process that we adopt with the introduction of markets, following feedback previously from the previous trial in late 2019, early 2020 in Leonard Street. So we adopted a more engagement-led process. We haven't actually introduced any new markets in the last year in that sense. In regards to street trading sites, that you are correct, there isn't a specific process in regards to street trading and engagement. One of the things that the officers do quite extensively is investigate the site, review sites, review the operation of the trader, and take into consideration impact to residents. Any licenses issued are always temporary for the first 6 months. That enables us to review that process and take feedback over that period of time. And as soon as we do get feedback, we do act on it. I'm happy to discuss in more detail, and we do need to pick up specifically on the coffee trader that you mentioned, because it's a lot more complicated than needs to be discussed this evening. But yeah, back to you, Councillor Williams.
I think it's great that there was an extensive consultation around Broadway Market. And for those of us who aren't councillors around London Fields, what we see, our experience is that there's a huge amount of attention and focus on Broadway Market. What happens elsewhere in the borough doesn't match what we see happening at Broadway Market. So you described quite a comprehensive consultation process. That doesn't happen elsewhere. I think it would be good for councillors if we understood across the board what kind of consultation is taken at other markets, so we can see how it compares. I don't think it does compare, is the point.
Yeah, I think we do need to be careful with the words we use, because they're engagement pieces and not consultations.
Okay, engagement. So what we don't see is the same level of engagement at other markets, and then when we do try to give feedback, there isn't the, I'm sorry, but there just isn't the engagement with officers. So I don't feel terribly satisfied you saying, can we take this away and not discuss it here? I think this is absolutely the place to discuss it, because when councillors try to discuss it with officers, we are pushed back and we are ignored and we are told that there isn't an issue, and it's not satisfactory for us as councillors, and it's not satisfactory for those residents whose lives are very seriously disturbed by some of those traders.
So 2 points on that. So I'm happy to address the coffee trader in this meeting if you like. We've made a number of visits as per the...
Not just one case.
Yeah, but that was the case that you referred to. And if you could be specific in regards to market and engagement, because I'm not, I haven't seen any other.
So there is there's the one at Old Street, and plus there's the coffee cart at Shepherdess Walk Market in particular.
So the Old Street Market site, which has 5 street food traders, is a historic site that's been operated by the service for 8.5 years. It temporarily was removed pending regeneration works within that area, and then went unused for a period of time. And then when I took over the service, I identified that it had been unused, and those traders were given the opportunity to return back to that site at which they had traded their business from for a considerable period of time. So from my mind, that was an existing trading site, and that wouldn't necessarily be something that we would engage on, but I take your point, and it's something we'll go away and look at. In regards to the coffee trader that you talk about, in the kind of responses that have been sent, and in regards to the complaints of the residents, we've made a number of visits to that site, and we've not been provided any evidence of any of the noise that has been alleged. We're not saying it doesn't happen, of course we're not, but whenever we've attended site, and I've sent, and Matt has been down to site personally on a number of occasions, senior officers have been down, other market service officers have been down. We've requested officers from other enforcement services to also make trips down there in regards to the alleged noise and disruption that coffee trader has caused. And none of that has been reported back by any of those officers. And it's difficult to take action against that license if the alleged noise issue is not evidenced. And that is primarily where we stand. That's the difficulty. I'm happy to meet on site. I'm happy to meet with the residents to understand in further detail what the issues are. That the use of that specific trader uses a specific electric generator. It's a new style generator which is almost silent, and the equipment that he's used is very bespoke, very expensive. That's been designed, and it is considerably less noisy and produces significantly less. Uses less energy than normal coffee traders, which is why I said we need to have a much more detailed conversation and explore this a lot further outside of this meeting.
Can I just stop this one now? Councillor Williams, yeah?
And this is the problem, that it becomes, because there is absolutely nothing in the document that enables either councillors or residents to raise their objections, and I think what, I don't want to get into individual casework, but there is a demonstrable problem here. And it becomes down to an individual officer or group of officers' judgment, and it shouldn't be just down to whether they think something is noisy or not. We need to have a process and to tell residents and councillors basically to go away, there isn't a problem, is not satisfactory, and the document doesn't set out a clear pathway for residents whose lives are being disrupted. And it's not just one location, there are several locations, particularly across Shoreditch. I think there is an issue about the proximity of these stalls to where residents live, and they're very, very close to the living spaces of residents. And I know that one has already been moved, and that's only been through consultation with the cabinet member, and we shouldn't have to go through that process all the time.
Okay, thank you. I think, yeah, you've made your concerns there. Okay, but I'm going to move it on. I've got Councillor Hanson.
Thanks, Chair. I won't pretend to have read every single paragraph of this document, but I'd like to take us to 19.6 and 19.7. So I'm actually coming at this from a different point of view and looking at the welfare of the licence holders rather than residents, although of course they could be one and the same. Now, in Donkey's years of being a shop steward and negotiating workplace agreements, I would say that 19.6 says if people are convicted, cautioned, arrested, or so on, their licence can be reviewed, and I don't have a problem with that. But 19.7 says if they're convicted of something or similar, their licence will be, their manager or assistant card will be revoked. Now I realise that's the manager or assistant, not the street trading licence holder, but then it says may face further enforcement sanctions. Now, the sort of examples they're giving, I think where we've got things about counterfeit and food hygiene that's directly relevant to the markets, to the market stall and its operation, and the way that Hackney residents are, the risk to Hackney residents, that's one thing. But some of these things, I'm not saying I think criminal damage is a good thing, but if you are arrested for criminal damage on a demonstration or something like that, I think that's very different from perpetrating food hygiene breaches or selling or knowingly selling counterfeit goods on a Hackney market stall. And I think 19.7 is a bit draconian, actually, to say you could have your card revoked for throwing the statue into Bristol Harbour, 300 miles from Hackney. Let's just say.
Okay, I think you're, Councillor, I think you're reading these as literal as opposed to specific. These terms and conditions, whilst that licensee or that assistant or that manager is operating their license, if whilst in those operating hours they go on to commit criminal damage. So for an example, there was a licensed trader during licensed hours.
During their trading thing.
It says
they're trading terms and conditions under their trading license, so they're not going to pertain to their activities outside of said trading.
It doesn't say during the time that they're trading. Dan, it just says who is convicted. So it's like in their spare time they've gone off and committed criminal damage and carried out other. Yes, it doesn't say.
Okay, we could take that note and look at the wording, but yeah, we would not. We trading.
Proposing that we. I mean, does this committee have the power to make that amendment to that clause, Chair?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean,
because if we do,
with a clarification.
The only way amendments can be made is through a dedicated powers report.
Well, I propose that we ask for such a report, Chair, because I think 19.6 doesn't say. I mean, I appreciate that the point that Mr. O'Sullivan is making, but it's the words in the policy that matter. And we don't, unless we have a big body of custom and practice out there that says something different, I think it should say that if it's while they are, well, I'm sure they're not
absolutely.
but while they're actually trading.
Yeah, because you're not running a CBS check, on these, and then because then, quite a number of street traders won't be able to have a statement. But you know what I mean? If you're looking at criminal record,
we do not,
and that's not what you
DBS
mean,
check.
and so it's not right.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it takes, but can we have the delegated powers to change that? Because that is absolutely not at all clear that if it's a criminal charge that occurs whilst they are trading.
Yeah, I'm happy to go away and review that.
That's quite a point of principle. All right, thank you very much.
Fabia, could you make sure that goes in the minutes, please?
Cool, thank you. That's a very good point. I'm going to work my way.
Chair, if I might.
Oh, go on then.
As I said before, I haven't read every word of this, so it may well be there. But I was looking at the bit about absence and sickness and maternity. Am I right in thinking that either the licence holder or a registered assistant or a manager must be present at all times when the stall is open?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you. I'm guessing that's somewhere else in the report.
That's based directly off of the legislation, the London Local Authorities Act, which is very clear on the percent, it prescribes the local authority to put a percentage of time in which the licensee and the manager has to then be present on the pitch. We have one of the lowest percentages comparatively to other boroughs.
No, I don't have a problem with requiring someone to be present who is responsible. In fact, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if people could just say, "Oh well, he's not here at the moment,"
Exactly.
can't help you. Yeah. All right. Fine. That's completely fine then, Chair. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Well, if I go to the next hand, I've got Councillor Snell.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I did drop an email to Dan, but you may not have seen it because it was last minute. But obviously, I regularly consult with my local market traders. And as everybody knows, whether we're looking after and fostering Ridley Road is an issue that comes up regularly at community and Labour Party meetings. So we have to be seen to be on their side. I just want to check that one issue came through this afternoon via Meg Hillier, one of the local MPs, and then the other arises out of this report and discussions that I had with the market traders. To say, what they're telling me is that the street trading rules of governance and terms of reference that's up tonight, they haven't seen. I mean, they always complain about consultation, and the reality at the moment is we want to get things done before the markets get up and running. So there's no sensible reason for traders not to want to get involved at the moment. And so I was a bit sorry to hear that. I just want to clarify a couple of things. But then the other thing that I want to say is it's perfectly simple for me to defend the market fees, which was a big issue about a year ago. What is more difficult is to defend the storage charges, and those will be covered ultimately. I know Dan really worries about keeping storage charges down, and that will be covered by the overall council review of leases and charges that's due out over the coming months. So there are bigger issues that affect making markets viable. The point that I want to understand now, Dan and Matt, I guess you can do it between you. First of all, we're still getting some whinges off the businesses who are on the side of the Ridley Road market, complaining about the fact that the markets gets closed off with those anti-terrorist controls. So can you just tell us quickly at this public meeting what was done to make sure that was properly consulted on and that it complies with road traffic management requirements? Yeah. And then that's the one that's come out of the local MP. And then the other thing that I don't really understand is I did hear about this meeting on Thursday. The concern was I was understanding, sorry, I misunderstood directly with the Ridley Road traders, because it was supposed to be a meeting, as I understood it, with the redesign, where again they're saying they wish they'd had a bit more consultation. What exactly is the meeting on the 11th, and what follow-up is planned after that? So is this about explaining the entire rules and regulations? Is it also about design issues in terms of the layout of the local markets? What exactly is happening in terms of now taking this out to the wider community, getting them on board and understanding, helping them understand all the background to it?
I'll take your first question. The hostile vehicle mitigation measures were approximately 24 months ago. London Borough Hackney were approached by the counter-terrorism team and highlighted a number of areas that they believe were of risk. Ridley Road, Broadway Market, Rivington Street, Hoxton Square, and then a couple of our other street markets were all brought into that conversation. From a market perspective, Ridley receives 2.8 million visitors across 6 days a week. And with the long roads, there is the possibility for gaining velocity for a hostile vehicle terrorist attack. And we were asked to engage into a process of risk assessments and work with the counter-terrorism team to come up with potential options. I led on working with the counter-terrorism officers in regards to the market sites. Andy Cunning, overall it's a street scene responsibility, and ultimately the question around the TMO and the resolution to Meg Hillier's request, that's all gone to street scene, which is why I'm not overall involved in that. So what I can tell you is all of the risk assessments were completed. The relevant traders associations were engaged with in regards to the measures on those. With Ridley Road specifically, there were a number of temporary mitigating measures that were put at the front of the Kingsland Road End market, and a number of different ones were trialled before they settled on the reinforced planters that are there as a temporary fix at the moment. And then we undertook works over the last 18 months, which you've had the reinforced bollards that go down the side of the Kingsland Road End that are already in place, the HVM rated gate at St Mark's Rise that's installed, and the additional layout of the new bollards that's already in place there. The delay, my understanding is of the ones at the Kingsland Road End are essentially down to an issue with National Rail, who are requesting a number of additional surveys, which are a cost about £30,000, which has been approved, and they're being undertaken as we speak, for a single layer of HVM rated bollards to go across the front. And we expect those to be installed before the end of 2021. In regards to your email and the specific question around the TMO and the full road closure and is it lawful, my understanding of the process, and I'm not an expert at TMOs, as I said, this needs to be directed to street scene specifically. Originally the experimental TMO was in place, but during the operating days of the market, it is a prohibited designated market street, and it has a full road closure in force. In regards to the Sunday specifically, my understanding is there is an experimental TMO in place, but the exact details of that, as I said, you'll need to pick that up directly with street scene. That is in place, and that road is fully secure essentially 7 days a week. So in regards to the meetings, I think you're getting two meetings mixed up on Thursday. So Thursday afternoon, I've organised a meeting with the Ridley Road Traders Association and colleagues at Street Scene and Economic Regeneration to meet with them to share the final designs and the consultation pack that's due to go out, because they haven't been able to, for one reason or another, get a meeting with Regen. So I was able to facilitate that for them. That happens Thursday afternoon. The meeting in the evening, in regards to just the governance document, obviously all of the terms and conditions, they're already live. They've been live for over a year. It's just the introduction of this, having it all in one place is what we're doing in the evening with all of the traders associations. But also the thing that they haven't seen is just the support document around the code of conduct and the traders association set up to be able to give them a term of reference document in regards to answering any questions, which for the RMTA, that isn't necessarily fully needed, but there are other associations in the borough that are very, very new that need a lot of hand holding whilst they're still in their infancy. Does that cover everything that you need, Councillor Snell?
Thank you, Dan. Very, very good response. Yes, I think that's covered everything. Thank you.
Superb.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Stopps.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I just want to come on to, as you'll know, shopfront trading, etc., which I'm a great supporter. I guess there's some good things in here. We've now got in black and white and a good document the fact of the license having to be in the window, or at least somewhere displayed. So I'm really pleased about that, and commentary on the A boards, and the leaflet that you produce. It also says that everything has to be removed at night. So that looks to me in black and white, Daniel. So thank you for that. And I think that these planters that are regarded as part of tables and chairs will have to be removed at night, I think. And I hope to see that as we come out of lockdown being enforced, because I think these things are ugly in most places. There was one thing I just wanted to mention about that, and that is this planning relationship that we have with planters. In all our work on regulatory committee, there's always some other department that could get involved in it. And planning, I know you talked about, and I think that was refuted by John Sang. They wouldn't be giving planning permission to planters. So I hope it. I think it mentions planning, but I hope you recognise that planning doesn't legitimise planters in the borough. The one thing I do have residual concerns, is about this 1.2 metres business. I think 1.2 metres in many locations, busy locations, particularly in Hackney, is not enough residual pavement space. And I think that at some point in the future should be reconsidered. It's 2 metres is an ideal. I can imagine going down a bit from that, but 1.2 metres is too narrow. So thank you very much. I shall flash this around if I get the opportunity to do so, because it has got some good stuff. And I should have, as I normally say before I take up the cudgels on these things, we do manage our streets as well, better than many others. And I acknowledge that, and thank you for some progress. Thank you.
Thank you. I still have the hands up. So Peter, I know that you're okay. Councillor Williams, are you all right? I've just got a couple of things myself. Yeah, you're okay. Thank you.
No.
But is it a question? That's the thing.
It's a process question, because this paper is noting, but what of the comments and concerns that councillors have raised where they haven't been satisfied tonight, and what's the process for bringing those back, so for officers to go away and address them and to bring them back either here or elsewhere, because it doesn't seem as though it's not a recommendation for us to accept or not accept, but to note it without any comment isn't satisfactory either. So we just need to address that if we can.
Councillor Snell, you're waving your arm, and that.
Right. I just wondered, because when Carol mentioned her concerns, I'm not sure, and I'm trying to help out the officers here, I'm not sure that that it may not be a supplementary document we're looking for. You know, in terms of resident engagement with things that are covered by licensing, it felt to me as if that was slightly a different document. In terms of dealing with my local issues around Wrigley Road, there's a very close alliance generally they don't always agree, but between traders and the people who live nearby. And I wondered whether what perhaps we're looking for is, rather than amend these documents, we're looking at that as a future piece of work, at some sort of process for engaging councillors and local residents. Because as Dan pointed out, the document they've got at the moment, particularly the one about governance, very much based on existing government council good practice. And I wondered if something similar could be produced in terms of engagement with local residents. It's just a thought. It's just a suggestion.
Councillor Snell, I absolutely take on board what you're saying, because this is a collation of what we present to the traders. This is not a process for us as councillors or the public how to deal with traders. Now, I do agree that I think that is a separate thing. I think it lays out, the guidance to the traders. It's kind of like that when we had the discussion on code of conduct. The code of conduct is for us. We'd like a code of conduct for the public, but this is not the document that says the both sides. And I think we will need to pick it up as if there is a gap here in processes for us as residents and councillors, but it's not going to be in this, because this is what we ask of the traders and what we present to them, as giving them the terms. So I do see that point. I was just going to pick up on, again, a couple of little points. We always talk about planters, and I couldn't help noticing the point that we would ensure that they are free of graffiti. And what I don't want to see is very keen officers removing planters that might have graffiti that might have been done by some street artist that might be like a Banksy, or you know what I mean? Graffiti / street art, and the removal thereof. It didn't seem to put the awareness that you might want your planters covered in stylish graffiti / street art. Seems maybe a minor point to ask for some hammer to crack the. Do you get what I'm saying, though? So
there's a number of due diligence checks and measures before any type of removal or seizure.
But to say they are free of graffiti
undertaken
is a bit of a swinging statement for the kind of planters that we get in Hackney. So I just don't know. And also the other thing about prohibited for premises to use single-use. I get single-use plastics, crockery, cutlery, but single-use napkins, and I would have thought that napkins were single-use, and kind of a key part if you're buying something that you're eating. So I just didn't get, is this something it's going to be looked at, that Hackney doesn't support single-use napkins?
It's interesting to note, because that suggestion was, that addition and a number of the additions around that were heavily pushed by a number of elected members. But again, more than happy to take that away and open up a further conversation.
Single-use plastics, absolutely. But if you're buying something that somehow you are eating, if this is what the section is, and I guess it is if you're talking about crockery, wouldn't you have a single-use napkin? That's all I'm saying, and that's in 10.7. I don't know how people think you can eat food that's somehow given to you without a single-use napkin.
Chair, is it are we distinguishing between single-use items that are compostable and single-use items that are not?
Well, that's the thing, but it's saying not plastics.
No, I get that.
And single-use napkins. It seems ridiculous.
Yeah, but if I wouldn't have a problem with a single-use paper bag, for example, containing a piece of street food.
Seriously, that's it. Kind of comes with. All right, look, I'm not going to. I think Councillor Hanson's point about being clear on your right to trade and whether or not you got a criminal conviction is a big one and a very important principle. I think we'll be laughed at if we say that street traders can't use single napkins if they're selling food, or that their planters will be whisked off by our officers if they've got graffiti on them, which they might have paid for. All right, those are my only points. They're just on the side. I do appreciate, though, the amount of work that has gone into pulling this together. That it is steps forward in terms of where we have been. We've actually seen it, have we not? We talk about this all the time. Particularly, Councillor Stopps, you've got to admit that the A-board work is quite good. I hope you did look at the A-board section specifically. That was for you, if no one else. If we have no other questions, taking everything on board, we get to note the contents of this document, the volume and governance across the licensable activities, and to operate the service to a high standard. And also, we get this, to note the scope and transparency of work carried out in relation to market, shop fronts and street trading licensing, operational delivery and enforcement. Hackney is the first service in both London and the UK to produce a document such as this and operate with this level of transparency. Don't normally have such long recommendations. Someone put that in, but it's not a bad one. So are we happy to accept those recommendations?
Agreed. Agreed.
Recommendation.
We had the legal thing about I can't legally note it. What do we do? But no, we have given clear
thumbs up.
Yeah, so it's a thumbs. And we have
with a certain level of dissatisfaction.
Yeah, no, there's always going to be those elements within it.
Well, I think it's important to know, and that's the point that I'm making. I want that noted.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it will be, and we will take up on that point. Okay. Thank you. All righty. I'll get back to my note. That might be the largest document we've ever looked at. As we have noted them, quick look at the draft work plan. There was a bit of a discussion that we had, Rabia, about trying to make sure that we don't have a tsunami wave of documents that we haven't been able to look at due to the cyber attack. So I have flagged that Jerry knows the number of documents that we're going to be presented with, and that I would rather have 2 meetings of a manageable size than a hideously long one, if at all possible. Yeah, so I have put that in for July. We have to note things for statutory reasons, but I don't want to do it until midnight one night. Okay, so let's have that. I haven't any other business.
Can I?
Councillor Stopps, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to refer you to the minute about this legal advice about TENS and licensing services, you know, that I hope everybody got it, and we can make sure our colleagues know that, you know, a TENS license doesn't give you a get out of free card for planning. I think that was what we asked to be confirmed and was confirmed. And I think that's important if it's being missed, that we make sure that our colleagues know that this is the case, because there was some ambiguity about it all. Thank you.
I mean, would you, for the purposes of making our minutes make sense, Rabia, do you want to stick that on the comments for the minutes? And they get circulated to everyone, because surely we could ask that it is circulated to all councillors as a shout out from the corporate as to a point of clarification on that matter. Yeah, I think it would be sharing information. That's our function to do, and I'd be grateful for that. I still have hands up. Are these legacy hands, as they say? So so Councillor Snell, you okay? You good? Vincent, you're lovely. Right. Okay, with all those notes noted, as we do, I thank you for
bye-bye. Thank you, officers.
coming along tonight, and thanks to the officers. They're big pieces of work, and we do commend you for them. It's just that we get hung up on the casework which we deal with. So thank you very much.
Jess.
Yes.